Any excitement over the impending free agency of Kevin Owens, whose WWE deal was set to expire at the end of January, ended this week with the news first reported by Fightful and later on confirmed by author Pat LaPrade that Owens has re-signed with World Wrestling Entertainment. LaPrade worked on that great Andre the Giant book that was released last year. If you ever wanted a definitive book on the life and the career of Andre the Giant, cutting out all the bullshit and all the exaggerations, that is the book for you to read. Owens signed a multi-year deal to stay with WWE, the same place that he has called home for the last 7 years. Per Dave Meltzer, it is a 3-year deal in the range of $2 to $3 million per year. And Fightful said that WWE made him what sources in the company said was an excellent offer. AEW insiders did not think the company would have been able to match the WWE offer. Owens appeared on LaPrade's podcast on Thursday. This is what he said of the new deal. This is right from the source himself. He says, "I'll just say that my contract still ends on January 31st, but not 2022. I will still be in WWE for several years. The decision was pretty easy because it was the best thing for my family, really. When it comes to that, it's always been a pretty easy decision to take. WWE has been my home for 7 years now, so I have a sense of belonging. Basically, I spent the majority of my career here. When you look at all the wrestling companies I've wrestled for, WWE, that is where I have been the longest. That is where I need to be for the next few years. That's how I felt, and that is the decision I made." Owens had previously told LaPrade in 2018 that he signed a 5-year deal with WWE, but his deal was said to have been restructured a while back before the pandemic, so it was due to expire next month and not 2023 as it was originally designed. If you listen to what Owens said there, in his own words, you don't have to try too hard to read between the lines. There's not a lot of mystery, I think, around what he said there. He re-signed because of the money. It was a deal that was too good for him as a family man for him to pass up. $3 million a year when you have a wife and 2 kids probably seemed like a no-brainer to him. As we've seen, though, it doesn't matter how much money you sign for or how many years, unless you have a no-cut contract. And Meltzer says Owens does not have a no-cut contract. Then it's really more of a day-to-day, week-to-week contract that WWE could terminate at a moment's notice for any reason that they see fit. That's really what it is. And for a company that has blamed most of the 80 talent releases this year on budget cuts, that's what John Laurinaitis told almost everybody. Budget cuts, kid, budget cuts. For a company that has blamed budget cuts for the majority of all these talent releases, it does call into question how credible that excuse really is when you throw that kind of money at one person. We know the budget cut excuse is horseshit. This does nothing to convince me otherwise. But the offer was too good for him to pass up. You know, if you look at the totality of his WWE run, there are certain people, and we've talked about them recently. We've talked about Johnny Gargano. We've talked about Kyle O'Reilly. No real updates on either one of them, although I think there's a very good chance we see Kyle on TV coming up this Wednesday. But we talk about people like that recently, and I look at a guy like Kyle O'Reilly, and I see absolutely no future for him in WWE. I don't. There's no future for him in NXT because they changed NXT. It's not geared towards someone like him. On the main roster, he's dead in the water. Johnny Gargano, I pretty much feel the same way about him. Kevin Owens is not in the same category with those guys. I don't look at them as being in the same category. If you look at the totality of Kevin Owens' run in WWE, going back to when he debuted in NXT. He was the NXT champion within 2 months of debuting on TV. When he hit the main roster a few months later, he got a clean win on pay-per-view over John Cena. He won the Universal title the following year when Finn Balor went down with an injury. And would have held it until WrestleMania to pay off his feud with Chris Jericho before Goldberg got hot, and we all know how that ended up. That ended up with Owens and Jericho going on second from the top at WrestleMania, and that was all Jericho needed to see to decide, I got to get out of here. That one decision could have changed the course of wrestling history, because that led to Jericho leaving, that led to Jericho agreeing to a match at the Tokyo Dome with Kenny Omega, which Tony Khan has said really is what birthed AEW, it is amazing when you look at these little decisions that are made and the overall lasting impact that something, just a trivial little booking decision or creative decision in one company can have on the rest of the wrestling industry. But he was the Universal Champion there for several months. He was Intercontinental Champion. He's been United States Champion. It's not as if Kevin Owens has been jobbed out for most of his run. He has his peaks and valleys, but he has largely been a featured guy in this company for the last 7 years. I do think that too often he falls through the cracks and they don't know what to do with him. He's talked about the same frustration in interviews before. Every time the draft comes up, he gets drafted to the other show, and he hopes to. I hope they draft me from Raw to SmackDown. I hope they draft me from SmackDown to Raw because I could use a fresh start. Every year it feels like this guy is in need of a fresh start. But I'm guessing this renewed push of late for the WWE title coincided with him signing that new contract. So, good for him. I don't think that it means he's getting the title at day one. I don't believe he is. But if he's happy, and if they continue to feature him high up on the card, whether he's the champion or not, whether he's in the main event or he's second or third from the top, if he's still kind of a featured guy the way that he's been, then you know what? That's not a bad place for him to be. So good for him, getting that money. And good on WWE for making a serious play to keep him. Hopefully when his program runs its course here, they have something else lined up for him and he's not forgotten about again. We've got WrestleMania coming up, and I think an Edge-Kevin Owens feud, I talked about that a few weeks ago. I pitched that. I said if Owens stays, looking ahead to WrestleMania, the match I'd love to see is Edge against AJ Styles. But it sure does look like we're going to get AJ Styles against Omos at WrestleMania. That is, if AJ even has a singles match at WrestleMania. So a nice consolation prize to Edge and AJ would be an Edge KO feud and the promos on TV leading up to it. Some good old-fashioned Canadian violence at WrestleMania. And a quick Jeff Hardy update. Jeff Hardy filmed a bunch of stuff that has popped up on social media with his brother Matt, all hanging out together with Matt's kids and his wife, and all is good on the home front. And there was a Twitch stream on Monday night, and Matt said that WWE drug tested his brother after the house show incident a few weeks ago that got him sent home and ultimately got him released when he refused rehab. And Matt was sure that the test would come back clean. He said they drug tested him after all this stuff. Wait until you hear the results of that, and when that comes back clean, then hopefully people will feel better about it. They won't, because a lot of the talk has been centered about maybe he was drunk, because Jeff has had issues with alcohol. The drug test wouldn't show whether or not he was drunk. So if he thinks that a clean drug test is going to put this shit to bed, then he's out of his mind. Because people aren't going to let that go. But Jeff, meanwhile, is moving on with his life. He can't do any wrestling until March, whenever his 90 days are up, but he's hitting the road. He's having a series of acoustic music performances and meet and greets. He has this little tour that just started on Thursday in Milwaukee. Friday, he was in Rosemont, Illinois. Last night, he was in Rockford, Illinois. And tonight, he's in Des Moines, Iowa. And then next month, he's got dates in Nebraska, in North Dakota, in South Dakota. So Jeff Hardy is hitting the road. If you are a fan of Jeff's music and he's coming to town, then you can go and see Jeff Hardy. But beyond that, there's no other information on this drug test that Matt talked about or anything else as it relates to what his wrestling plans are, although I think we all know where he is going to end up next year.